Cameras galore. Cameras are all over the place. Okay, I'm live on YouTube and Facebook, on my personal page, and all sorts of different places. So, hello everybody. I'm not sure which camera to look at actually, but I'm just going to kind of glare in that direction. I hope you're doing well this evening, and welcome to the Landlord Coach Ask Coach. I'm not even sure what to call this because it's about 10 hours too late for a Landlord Ask Coach session. But I have quite a bit I wanted to say tonight, so I'm going to post this both on my personal page, the Landlord Coach page, and of course on YouTube. So hope you are all doing well today. It is the weekend, and I don't know when you'll watch this. If you're watching this on replay, just let me know that you're watching on replay. But so I want to get into. I've got a couple things that I want to talk about. And I've got some really cool information to share. So one of the reasons why I couldn't actually broadcast today at 11 o'clock because I was at I was doing some professional development, some continuing education today, which as you know, as a coach, that's one of the things I talk about. Coaching isn't one of those things where it's just good for you but not good for me, right? No, that's ridiculous. I have a mastermind I belong to, and I pay a coach there who helps me with my vision and all the things that I talk about. And then today I was in a class with a woman named Robin Thompson, and she is known as the Queen of Rehab. And while that sounds like maybe it's not that maybe that's the kind of rehab you think I should go to, but no, this is actually rehabbing properties. So, but it was a fantastic course today. And although much of the information was stuff that I already kind of knew, but there was still information that was presented. That was fantastic. So I really had a really good day, and tomorrow I expect to be more of the same. It's really amazing when you have someone that's a professional even though they're similar in the similar realm, they're going to bring other things that are that you can learn from, right? Just keep an open mind. Don't come to the table trying to show how smart you are. Come to the table with an empty cup so they can fill it, and you can learn from that. So a couple things I want to talk about tonight. I put 3 things to get started, and of course I am the landlord coach. So one of the things I want to talk about is, it's so obvious to me on how to get into rental properties that I've had people ask me this question. I've never really thought about doing a quick video on this, on how to actually get started in the rental business, if that's really something that you want to do. And so I'm going to answer that tonight. That's one thing I'm going to answer tonight. And I also want to talk a little bit about some things I've got coming up, and also just kind of an overview in terms of where I came from, so you understand. Some of you know my story. Some of you are very familiar with my story. So just please be patient. But I'm going to get to the 3 things to do to get started. And if that's something that you're interested in, we can talk about what it'd be like to work together. But yeah, I just talk about some things that's coming up. So Richard Penn, you're listening. That is terrifying that you're on. All right. Well, it's always good to see you, my friend, up north. So I'm going to be coming and visiting you real soon. But anyway, so tonight I want to talk about and I've got my whiteboard behind me. So when I teach, this is something that I like to employ, that I like to use. But one of the other things that I want to talk about is not just about getting into rental properties, but also how to manage the human equation. And I know there are so many people that get into real estate because they're like, well, I don't want to deal with people, so I'm going to get into real estate. And I'm telling you, that is absolutely the wrong approach. And maybe you're not good with people, and that's fine if that's not your skill set. But I don't want you kidding yourself that you're never going to have to deal with people, so you're going to invest in real estate. Because guess what? It's not real estate that pays the bills. It's people that pay the bills. You're not, even if you're selling real estate or you're renting real estate, really all you're doing is you're selling or renting time. And once you get that concept in your head, because once that time is gone, that is stale inventory. You are never going to be able to resell that time again. So I just want you to understand that for those of you who are like, well, I'm not a people person, so I don't want to have to deal with people. that's just something I want to put that fallacy aside. All right. So let's talk first about 3 things that you can do to get started. But, you know, before I get too deep into that, I want you to understand really about the way that I think, and then maybe it'll make sense in terms of how I answer this question. So back when I was going through all the stuff that I went through back in 2009, 2010, I was managing about 92 rental units on my own by myself, and I had I had 92 rental units, and I had about $65,000 a month coming in revenues. So on the outside looking in, anybody that knew me was just like, man, that guy's got it going on. He's hustling. He's making it happen. And I was working hard. I was working my ass off. And even though from the outside looking in, I had a pretty decent life. I mean, I had lots of leverage, but I had the car, the house, all the things that I could see why they would envy that. And of course, that's what I had set myself up for. That was, it was something to be enviable, owning enviable things. But what I didn't have was an enviable lifestyle. I was literally working myself to death, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days, back to back to back to back, 7 days a week, could never take any time off. And then, of course, when things got really bad, and, when the economy fell apart, that was really when things got bad. So, of course, I was bringing in $65,000 a month. And when the labor market started to fall apart, it hit the people who could least afford it. And that was the people in the rental class. And I was managing very low end rentals at that point in time. I really didn't have, my average rents were probably around $600 to $700 a month. Now they're probably closer to about $1,000 or $1,100 a month, because the properties that I oversee are much higher caliber. So they're more modern, they are bigger, they can just command a higher level of rent. The properties I had before just weren't that way. So it definitely changed a lot for me as I was going and, managing all these properties that would bring in $65,000 a month, and it hit me right square in the middle of the face. Well, the problem is I was $65,000 a month, and you're like, oh, well, poor Mark, he's bringing in $30,000 a month. But the thing is, I relied on a lot of that revenue to help cover lots of overhead, mortgages and, just the upkeep on the properties and other things. So I wasn't living real high in the hog, but I was living an over leveraged lifestyle, especially as I was looking at from my personal perspective. What ended up happening was I got a cold, and many of you know this story, but I got a cold and went to the hospital. The doctor said, take this medicine and you'll be fine in a few days, but make sure you get some rest. Well, at that point in time, because the labor market was falling apart, I was working 16, 17, 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day, grabbing a nap in Lowe's parking lot whenever I could, rolling out a blanket on a floor of a rental and grabbing a nap there when I could. I was absolutely, completely, and totally run down. I was literally working myself to death. And because I couldn't afford help, because of the basically the knot that I had worked myself into, there was no end in sight. I basically had, put myself in the middle of this Frankenstein monster, and there's just no way out. So, of course, I started losing properties, and I could not pay the mortgages. And all told, by the end of it, I had turned a $6 million portfolio into $1.5 million. And I lost nearly everything that I had built up in the previous 10 years was gone. I had a relationship that was circling the bowl already. That went away. I had, the house, the car, all the stuff that I had worked up to at that point had gone away. So that was really, really just a really, really tough time for me. So as I went on and, as I'm sitting there, literally laying in the hospital, I worked with someone that was a mentor of mine. Sorry. And one of the things that we often talked about, and they didn't really call it this, but this is what I became to call it, but it was really about establishing a vision for my future. And for those of you who have read the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0, it really comes down to having a rock solid vision for my future. And that vision is what really started where I really got purposeful in what the hell I was doing it all for in the first place. It's great to have 92 rental units, but not at the expense of having all my free time basically chewed up managing it. I mean, it was a disaster. So that's where I came up with the VIP model, and it all starts with vision. So the rest of this part, instead of just vision, it's the vision, infrastructure, process, paradigm. So it's vision, infrastructure, and process, and that's VIP. So that VIP, just so we can go through that really quickly, and I know some of you have heard it, so bear with me, but the VIP, the vision, infrastructure, process, paradigm, is really about establishing a vision for where you want to go. What's the whole point of it anyway? Not 92 rental units, but having maybe a month where I could go and be completely disengaged from the world and go on a cruise. Or now it's over, watching and making sure that my sons grow up to be two good men. That's a vision that I can get behind. At the time, they weren't in my life, but that's a vision that is worth having, not just becoming a slave to how I produce income, but actually focusing on life output, because we work to live, right? I mean, we not live to work, we work to live. And with that vision, with that concept, that's where really things started to turn around for me. Now, granted, I'm flat on my back in the hospital with all this stuff stacking up on me, and I'm literally losing my life. Is just crumbling around me. Keep in mind too, I almost died in the hospital. I almost died from double pneumonia. So as I'm laying there getting better, I can't say it was a straight line trajectory, but that's really where I got very purposeful about establishing a vision for my future, then establishing an infrastructure for that business that I wanted, and then putting processes in place that run on that way, run on that infrastructure. So if you think of it this way, is the vision is your map, the infrastructure would be the train tracks, and the process is the train that runs on those tracks that all stays in alignment with your vision for the future. Okay, so some of you have heard me say that before. So establishing the vision for your future in that context is really the first thing that, if you're going to start getting into rental properties, I don't care what it is that you do, you first and foremost, you have to establish your vision. And I know that sounds a little hokey. I know that sounds like, oh, come on, Mark, I want to talk about, leverage and using other people's money and all that other stuff. You have to start with vision. You have to start with why. You have to start with what the whole point of it is for in the first place, because you may determine that, real estate isn't the best investment for me. You might figure out, hey, if my vision is to get downriver and I want to use a vessel to get there, whatever vehicle I want to get downriver, you might say, well, a canoe would be a good vessel for that, right? But if your vision is ultimately get to the top of a mountain, a canoe would not be a good vessel for that. So that's why I say you need to look at your real estate business as a vessel, because that might not be the best vessel for you. You might just say, I don't have the risk tolerance to handle real estate, or I don't have, whatever that is, whatever you may not have that thing that would make real estate a particularly good investment for you. Now, I would argue that it is good for most people. And I would really like to talk to that individual that says, I don't think real estate's for me, because you might not be thinking about it in a creative way. But that's really what I'm talking about. So first and foremost, you have to establish a vision for your future. Now, the problem with establishing a vision for your future is it's really hard for you to do that on your own. I mean, it's really, really difficult. I cannot get to my own vision for my future. In fact, I spent 2 days in St. Louis with my coach, and we were in a group setting, and it still was difficult for us to pull and extract our vision out from ourselves because we're too damn close to it. And it's not until you get that visceral, guttural reaction where you're choking on your words, and it's almost, you're almost at the point of tears because it's so important to you, but you can't say it because you're almost too close to it. That's how you know you're getting close to your vision for your future. Now, I'm not saying I'm necessarily the coach to do that for you. I'm just saying a lot of times you need someone to help you just keep asking those questions, why, so you can get to that vision. And that's really, and that's an important thought, because the more you're asking those questions, you really start, even though you say, well, I want to make more money, and someone says, well, why? It should be obvious, right? But it's not obvious, because it's really more often than not, it's not about money. It's about something that's important to you, and you think that it's something that money can deliver for you. because people think they want more rental properties because they want more security, or they want more certainty, or they want significance in their world. They want to feel important in their world. And it really has very little to do with rental properties, and it has something else to fulfill a different human need. Okay. All right. So first and foremost, you have to establish the reason why you're doing this in the first place, your vision for your future, why you're wanting to do that. Second, now this is going to be we're going to shift it in a different direction. But number two, if you're going to get into, if you're really wanting to understand, to get started in the rental business, you really need to understand just the business. Okay. So you just need to understand the rental property business. And I mean everything about the rental property business. So you really need to understand the business itself. And there's a couple different aspects of that. So, I mean, it's kind of vague, and it's a big, broad answer. And it's like, okay, well, what does that even mean? But a lot of people get into real estate, especially rental real estate, not understanding really what it's about. Like I said earlier, if you understand that the rental business is really about selling time than it is about renting a property, that's where you're really going to understand. Because if you have stale inventory, meaning today's gone, and if today that property wasn't rented, whether it was through a vacation rental or an Airbnb or just a traditional rental, once that inventory is gone, once that time is gone, you are never getting it back. You can't get today back. And that's the problem. So that's really what you're selling. You're selling time. You're not really renting a property. So once you get your head around that, that's really where things can start to shift for you. Now, from the business aspect, okay, so you really need to understand the business cycle, how money comes in, what the product is going to be. If you're looking at Airbnb model, okay, I would argue that really the Airbnb and the vacation, rentals, they are really more of a hospitality business than they are a rental business. I think they're actually fundamentally a different business than traditional real estate. Different conversation for a different time, but I would argue that they are fundamentally different. That's all said, you really need to understand the business that you're trying to get into. So there are lots of ways you can do that. You can do that through a coach. You can do that through books. You can do that through mentoring. You can do that a lot by watching videos like this. But become a student of business. And I'm also going to tell you, don't be dogmatic in your approach in how you view that. What I mean is, don't have such a narrow focus towards real estate that you only look at real estate type stuff, right? Because when you look at becoming a student of business, you're going to look for ideas in all aspects of what you can bring to business. And I'll give you an example. So when I came from the Marriott, I worked for the Marriott for several years, and I was the assistant controller. I have a background in accounting, as many of you know, and I worked for the hospitality industry, not only for the Marriott, but for a limited service hotel here in Indiana. Now, when I worked for the Marriott, they talked about something called the LEARN process. And the LEARN process is really about guest interaction. Now, when you interact with guests, you would listen to them and empathize and so forth. Well, I actually borrowed/stole the LEARN process, and I adapted it to the rental business. Okay. So I'll just give you a quick example. So if I'm going to engage with a client, with a resident, okay, I'm going to see if I can write this off to the side where you can see it. What I teach is LEARN. Okay. So I'm going to write this here. All right. And LEARN is nothing more than an acronym. All right. So this is something, if you're dealing with customers, this is something that you can all use. So if the first thing, the L is simply to listen. And I see the glare is kind of glaring this out a little bit. See if I can move this over a little bit. But L is to listen. Okay, that's to listen. It simply means stop talking. Don't interrupt them. Let them go. Let them bloviate. If you think that they've got no point in their story, encourage them to get to a point. Say, okay, and that happened how? Okay, right, like encourage them, but listen to them. Don't interrupt. The E in the LEARN process and the client interaction is empathy. Okay, empathize. Okay. Now, I think people have a screwed up understanding of what empathy is, so I'm just going to explain it in a really basic term, okay? Even that this stupid Marine can understand. Sympathy and empathy are different. And most people bring sympathy to a conversation when it's really empathy that they should be bringing. So let me tell you the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is about you and your feelings. Empathy is about them and their feelings. That's a huge difference. So, oh my gosh, I feel horrible for you is sympathy. Oh my gosh, I understand why that would be upsetting to you. Slight difference. That's empathy. And that's understanding. Okay? Huge difference. So again, difference between sympathy and empathy. So again, the learn process, it's really when you're dealing with client interactions, it's that listen, just listen, stop talking, listen. I know that's even tough for me because I like to talk. But it's listen and empathize. And empathy, again, sympathy is about you, empathy is about them. So please make sure that you're empathizing and not sympathizing. It's a big difference. So A, simply apologize. I can't tell you how many businesses screw up simply because they don't say I'm sorry. It may not be your fault, but it is your problem to deal with. Just say you're sorry. It doesn't mean that you're at fault. I'm really sorry that you're having this issue. I can understand how that would be frustrating, and you're having that conversation. They appreciate, especially customers, especially any customers that you're dealing with. They're going to appreciate that you simply said you're sorry. The R is to restate the question or the problem. So restate. Why do you think that you would restate the issue? It's simple. It lets them know that you heard what the hell they said. So if they called up and in the rental context said, my dryer's not working, and you said, oh, let me restate the question, I'm listening. Okay. So from what I understand, the dryer's not drying the clothes all the way. Oh man, I'm really sorry. I can understand why that would be frustrating. So what you're saying is it's running, but the clothes are not getting dry, right? Are they getting warm? Okay, they're not. It's not even getting warm. Okay, very good. I understand. You restated the question. You restated the issue. And then finally, the N is to notify. Now, and then notify who needs to know, which would be, a repair person or, whatever. So that's the learn process, right? That's basically it. Now, like I said, I borrowed that from the hospitality industry, but that's because I was a student of business. Now, I don't mean that you have to rush off to college and become a business student. What I'm saying is I became a student of business, which means that I was looking for ways where I can incorporate other things in other ways, all these different processes that I might be able to incorporate in, into the rental business, all right, into what it is that I do. All right, that's, again, more to the point as to why I went to a real estate seminar this weekend that is being hosted by someone who's the king of, or the queen of rehab. She does flips. Now, she does buy and holds, but she fundamentally does a lot of flips, and she's really good at it. So I went there with a lens of what can I learn from her and how can I incorporate what she does into my business. Not saying that I won't do flips from time to time. As you guys know, I'm doing a flip down in Seymour, Indiana, when things are progressing really well down there. Plumbing is in, by the way, and the electrical should be actually done by, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. But things are really going along well there, right? And so I went there with just the lens that I could look through. Okay, so there's that. The final thing is, let me just make one final step here as we're talking about business. As it relates to business, you can't help but incorporate part of where your personal life is going to be impacted by this. So one of the things on the business side is, and I want to just throw this in there as it's almost like a 2A, because I really want to make sure that I make this point, is you really need to understand credit. You really need to understand, and that's a part of the business that, unless you're going to run out, you can't save your way to prosperity. You can't save your way to buying a property. I mean, you can, but unless you're knocking down, 6 figures a month, most people just are not going to have an ability to save up for a property that they could buy, especially if you're in California. I mean, the property values out there are just ridiculous. I mean, it's hard enough saving up for a down payment there. So one of the things I'll call it here is really understanding credit. So I'm going to put that in here as kind of like a 2A, but really understanding credit and how that works, how the banks will loan you money, what that looks like, how you can buy a property and live in it for a little while, maybe buy a duplex for a little while. You can buy a duplex. I believe you can buy a duplex with an FHA loan. I think a VA loan actually will even let you do that. Now, I'm not in that world. I don't borrow a lot of money. I'm self-funding a lot of stuff that I have, but I'm just letting you know that that is a critical component to understanding. So a banker who you could, maybe a banker friend, you could take the lunch. That's a great way to learn it. But if you have other questions, you can reach out to me. And of course I can help you with resources on that. Okay. So the final thing, so the 3 ways to get into your first rental. One of the first things I talked about is obviously getting a vision as to why you want to do it in the first place. Second, have an understanding of the business in general, like just making sure that you're educating yourself. You understand all aspects of that as much as you can. Like I said, you can do that through videos, you can do that through books and Audible, understanding and bringing it in the way that you need to learn. I love audiobooks, but I don't learn that way. I'm very entertained by audiobooks. I just don't learn that way. I am a visual kinesthetic learner. So guess what I do? I write shit down. I write all sorts of stuff down because I need to feel the pen on paper. And when I read a book, I go through it and I underline and make notes and mark it all up. And I mean, if I have a book out of reach right now, but if I pulled any one of the books off the stack that I have read, you go through that book, my entire book is written through, underlined, notes in the margins, and then the back 5-6 pages that are blank, I've taken all sorts of notes to summarize everything that I've learned in that book. And that's how I learn. Not everybody learns that way. That's just the way I learn, but that's why I say make sure you're learning in the way that is going to be most beneficial to you. Okay, finally, we're going to move on to the third thing, and that is really understanding your product. Now, obviously, that would sound somewhat simple, okay? And it is. I'm kind of being a little bit vague here just for the sake of, so we can understand really where we're trying to go here. But, first and foremost, who is it you're really wanting to work with? Developing that client avatar is really, really important. Now, what I mean by that, if you are wanting to work with, say again, we'll use vacation renters for example, or vacation rentals, for example. If you're wanting to deal with people that are coming into your local area because you live, say, near a university, or say you work, or you have properties that are going to be near, a hospital where people, come for long periods of time where they could stay there because unfortunately they have a very sick relative or something along those lines, or near a university where people will come and they stay for several months at a time. That could be a client avatar for you. I mean, you really want to be specific with that. But let's say, you want to deal with, with single family dwellings, which means you might deal with a typical avatar might be a family with several kids, or, several adults that live in the area, whatever it is. Just be careful not to violate fair housing laws and be too overly specific in an avatar that's going to say, well, I'm only dealing with, with Catholic families with at least 5 children who, that's ridiculous. Don't be silly like that. But when you're developing your client avatar, just understand who your market's going to be. Because when you get too wonky in your market, that's going to be really difficult for you to pick out your product, which will be the property itself. So when you're looking at the property itself, of course, everybody always talks about location, but I want to make sure that you understand what location. There's more than just a physical spot of where the property is. Now, yes, okay, a property on a corner might be more desirable than not. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. You have to think of all aspects of a location, which is, what are the laws like in that specific area? And I mean, like if you say you're the difference between one side of town to the other side of town, where maybe you go from city court to county court, that could be different, right? You could be dealing with 2 different court systems and fundamentally different ways in which they are interpreting the law. And that happens. That absolutely happens, because if you get 2 different judges, you're dealing with 2 different personalities, and they can be fundamentally different. So you just need to make sure that you understand how things are working, especially as it relates to location. And that could be, you could deal with that all the time, all over the place. So other things, you might be dealing with a location that deals with an HOA. So you might have a location that's ideal, and you'd say, oh man, this is really great. Location item might be school district, right? Like this is a perfect school district. This is a very desirable school district. But let's say that you have you're buying properties in a subdivision with an HOA that's a complete pain in the ass. Well, now that property may be worth more because they don't allow any sort of nonsense to go on in that HOA. Okay, that's fine. But if you're dealing with an HOA that is run by that's running amok by some people that are just out of control, that never got to that got bullied in their own sandbox when they were a kid. Well, unfortunately, you're having to deal with some problems that it can get out of control. That's all I want to say there. So just understand the location isn't necessarily only about the physical spot that you're in. It also involves the other aspects of location where it could be ordinances. It could be, for example, here in from Lafayette to West Lafayette, there's an ordinance in West Lafayette that will not allow more than 3 unrelated people to live in a property. Okay, that's an ordinance that the people there have had to adapt to. And people coming in out of the area may not know about that. And that's obviously that could be a big problem. Now, if they were buying it for a campus rental and they're thinking that they're going to allow their son and 4 of his buddies to live with him, that's a problem because you can't have any more than 3 unrelated people. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about when I'm talking about location. So that's really what I'm talking about when I mean product. Is it's not just necessarily the client avatar, who you're marketing it to, but also making sure that you understand the product itself in terms of what it is that you're trying to do. Just because you cooked up the idea and it may work in your hometown doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be translatable to other areas of where you're thinking about. Okay, that's all I have for tonight. Now, I know this went super long, and I know some of you stuck in there, and I know some of you are going to watch this on replay. Really quick, I appreciate you sticking it out and saying hello. One thing I do want to offer, I am teaching a course that's going to bring all of this really deep and granular on July the 13th and 14th in Indianapolis. It's going to be available. I'll put a link up. It's going to be, I keep the pricing reasonably low because I like to get the classes a reasonable size, but I also don't let the classes get too big either. So if it's something that you're interested in, it's in the events section at, if you go to coaching and then events, and it's in, you'll see it posted for July 13th and 14th in Indianapolis. And I think I've got it priced right now at $4.99, and it's going to sell out very quickly. So if it is something you're interested in, you can reach out to me here. I'll get you the link, but I'll post the link on here as well if you have any questions. All right. That's all I have, everybody. And I've got, I know I went way longer than what you guys are used to, but thanks for all your feedback. Thanks for all your support. Please remember, if you don't place a value on your free time, someone else will, and there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have a great rest of your evening. Great weekend. Take good care. See ya.